And there was a band with a curious tone of the cornet, clarinet, big trombone, fiddle, cello, big bass drum, bassoon, flute, and euphonium, each one making the most of his charms, all together in the floral dance.
Nobody will ever know just how many records Peter Dawson made. Latest estimates put the figure at over 1,500, with sales exceeding 25 million. He was one of the most prolific recording artists of all time.
I felt so lonely standing there, and I could only stand and stare, for I had no maid with me. Lonely I should have to be in that quaint old Cornish town. When suddenly hastening down the lane, a figure I knew I saw quite plain, with outstretched hands I rushed along, and carried her into that merry throng, and fiddle and all went down. We danced the band, the curious tone, the cornet, clarinet, the big trombone, fiddle, cello, big bass drum, bassoon, flute, and euphonium, each one making the most of his charms, all together in the floral dance. Dancing here, dancing there, jigging, jonking everywhere, up and down and around the town. Hurrah for the Cornish floral dance.
Peter Dawson's recording career spanned 50 years, and during that time he became the most well-known and respected singer in the British Empire. He was born on January the 31st, 1882, in a house in Castle Street, Adelaide, the 8th of 10 children born to Alison and Thomas Dawson. Mr. Dawson, who was Scottish, had given up a career at sea to settle in Adelaide. He was a strict Presbyterian, sending the family to church twice every Sunday and forbidding piano playing on the Sabbath. Young Peter attended the Pulteney Street Grammar School and did well in sporting activities, winning a prize for swimming in 1895. 2 years later, he won a 5-mile race for boys under 16. He became a capable boxer, notching up a South Australian amateur title in his teens. He was encouraged to sing by his mother, who herself possessed a sweetly modulated voice. At 16, he joined the choir of St. Andrew's Church in Wakefield Street, Adelaide, after which he started taking formal vocal lessons. His singing instructor was C.J. Stevens, founder and conductor of the Adelaide Choral Society. Although his parents supported his interest in singing, Peter was still expected to have a trade, so he began work in his father's flourishing ironworks business. During this time, Mr. Stevens convinced Peter that he should enter the bass solo section of the Ballarat South Street singing competition. The review in the press the day after the competition said, "Mr. Peter Dawson scored an easy win for his singing of The Bandit Chief." Professor Peterson, the sole judge, remarked that he was head and shoulders above all the others who appeared. Mr. Stevens was so convinced of Peter's future that he assisted with the cost of sending him to England for further study. And so it was that Peter, accompanied by his elder brother James, departed from Adelaide on March the 26th, 1902, aboard the SS Afrique, a vessel which was half sail, half steam. They arrived in London in late May. It was Derby Day, and also the last day of the Boer War. After some preliminary training in Glasgow, Peter returned to London and was accepted as a pupil by Charles Santley, a man regarded as the greatest English baritone of the day. Peter successfully auditioned for a concert tour of the west of England, organized by the great Wagnerian soprano, Madame Albani. The first concert was in Plymouth. Peter was 22, in hallowed company, and very nervous. Just before his entrance, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Charles Santley. "They are going to like your voice," he said. "Go on with a smile and enjoy yourself." Peter entered with assurance and sang with ease. The encore was the bandolero.
I am the bandolero, the gallant bandolero. I rule the mountains and I claim as contraband what comes this way. I am the bandolero, king with a thought of hero. I am an outlaw, but have a kingdom beneath my sway. Roaming the mountains, an outlaw defiant, brave and gallant bandolero, will capture all
critics were loud in their praise of young Peter's voice, and when he returned to London, singing engagements began to come his way. It was also found that his powerful voice and excellent enunciation were ideal for recording, and his very first session with the talking machine took place in either June or July 1904. The very first song he recorded was a popular hit of the day called Navajo. At least part of that recording has been preserved.
Navajo, sung by Mr. Leonard Dawson, Edisonville Records.
Down on the sandhills of New Mexico, there is an Indian man.
You'll notice that on the record, Peter is referred to as Leonard Dawson, just one of the many pseudonyms he employed in those early days. Another was Hector Grant. This was a Scottish music hall character that Peter assumed. Hector's style was very reminiscent of the great Harry Lauder. Peter, disguised in a tartan kilt, made his stage debut at the Coliseum in Glasgow in June 1906 and was a great hit with the audience.
I wish I had someone to love me, sung by Hector Grant, Edison Record. I wish I'd been married to Geordie. I wish Geordie'd been married to me. For he courted me weekly for nearly 10 years, then left me to drift like a raft on the sea. I really don't know what induced him to trifle with me, what a sin. He went and he married another, and left me to sing or to swim. He did, the Lord don't scoundrel, that's what he is. He can find his jilted mate. And I don't suppose he'd care if I ruined myself. But I'll get him summons, that's what I'll do, and I'll show him up, the Lord don't scoundrel. Mind you, he took me to a picnic. And he boiled the tea in a can, and he coaxed me to 3 lumps of sugar, as sure as death he did. Then I kissed him. Then I had to ask him to kiss me back. I felt very shy about it, mind you, but I didn't care. Anyway, he kissed me on the brow. And when I think of it, it makes my mouth water. In fact, streams as water he knew. I wish I had someone to love me, someone to call me his doodle-doodle, someone to say, I've come away, but it hasn't come up till now. I wish I had someone to love me, someone to call me his doodle-doodle, someone to say, I've come away, but it hasn't come up till now.
About this time, Peter met up with Dame Nellie Melba, and though they made a couple of recordings together, they never hit it off. Peter described her as a nice Australian girl who became the spoilt snob of the music world. He delighted in taking her down a peg or two, and in an interview many years later, he recalled the days when she reigned supreme at Covent Garden.
As she was the principal singer, and nobody could depose her, and she could stop any singer from coming there to sing. And one was mentioned, I think it was Tetrazzini. She hadn't a chance of even getting in there with a tin opener while Nellie was there. But as soon as Nellie went, in came Tet. Well, anyway, and it had Melba, great letters. Melba, silence, silence.
On the dressing room?
Silence everywhere on the stage, and they used to watch. And whenever she came out of her dressing room to come across to enter whatever set she was going to sing on, all these crept away like mice out of sight. They wore plimsoll shoes so they wouldn't make any noise. See? Never dropped anything, never did a thing. She didn't see anybody, only the actors and actresses who were with her, the singers. And then, of course, The time came then they resented this, a lot of these stage hands. They didn't like her. Because of this, they reckoned was brutal treatment. And she had a little piece of plate glass on the side of the stage, little plate glass shelf. And she used to suck this Australian wattle gum. And she'd take it out of her mouth and put it on this little, and go on to sing. And of course, these stage hands, one of the clever Alex, he swapped that for a chew of tobacco. See? And she came off, and say, put that in the mouth, and oh, fireworks, me boy. Ooh, everybody got the sack. Everybody was sacked. Oh, she was a terrible thing to do, you know.
Yes, terrible thing to do.
Oh, yes, murder. Anyway, they were all back next day, and she forgot all about it, but there you are.
In 1905, Peter married Annie Noble, the daughter of a theatre manager who sang professionally as Annette George. They stayed married for nearly 50 years, until in 1953 she died after a long illness. The following year, he married her sister, Constance. In 1909, Peter returned to Australia for a national concert tour, and he found that even in the most remote outback areas, his fame had preceded him. The gramophone had replaced the piano as the family centre of entertainment.
Come and make eyes at me down at the old Bull and Bush. Come and have some port wine with me down at the old Bull and Bush. Hear the little German band. Just let me hold your hand, dear. Do come and have a dance or two down at the old Bull and Bush.
Because there were no disc recording studios in Australia, Peter and his wife more or less became residents of Britain. Early in 1909, Peter gained a high reputation for his singing at Covent Garden, notably in Wagner's The Master Singers. But preferring to sing to the man in the street, he decided to concentrate on the concert hall and the recording studio. He undertook tours of Australasia in 1912 and again in 1914. This last visit was interrupted by the outbreak of war, and Peter didn't return to the mother country till 1916. At his Sydney farewell concert, the programme patriotically announced, "Mr. Dawson generously donates a sandbag for every ticket sold." Upon his return to England, he made several recordings for the gramophone company, which became top sellers.
A bachelor gay am I, though I'm suffered from Cupid's dart. But never I vow will I say die in spite of an aching heart. For a man always loves a girl or two, though the fact must be confessed. He always swears the whole way through. To every girl he tries to woo, that he loves her for the best. At 17, he falls in love quite madly with eyes of tender blue. At 24, he gets it rather badly with eyes of a different hue. At 35, you'll find him flirting sadly with 2 or 3 or more. When he fancies he is past love, it is then he meets his last love, and he loves her as he's never loved before. A girl, as you've heard of old, is a kind of a paradox. She changes her mind more times, I'm told, than ever she does a frock. And a man's like a moth around a flame, for it's nearly always found he burns his wings, but all the same, the nicest part of Cupid's game is fluttering round and round. At 17, he falls in love quite madly with eyes of tender blue. At 24, he gets it rather badly with eyes of a different hue. At 35, you'll find him flirting sadly with 2 or 3 or more. When he fancies he is past love, it is then he meets his last love, and he loves her as he's never loved before. At 17, he falls in love quite madly with eyes of tender blue. At 24, he gets it rather badly with eyes of a different hue. At 35, you'll find him flirting sadly with 2 or 3 or more. When he fancies he is past love, it is then he meets his lost love, and he loves her as he's never loved before.
Back in Australia, just before the end of the war, Peter enlisted in the AIF. He was on a troop ship in the Panama Canal when the armistice was declared. His discharge papers reveal his height as 5'6.5", eyes grey, with tattoos on both arm and chest. He was described as a vocalist and master plumber. Back in London after the war, Peter set about re-establishing himself, and by the end of 1923, he had over 120 titles in the HMV catalogue, including works by Mozart, Verdi, Richard Strauss, and Gilbert and Sullivan. For light-hearted material, he used the name Will Strong, often in duets with Eric Cortland, who turned out to be the famous English tenor, Ernest Pike. Before we leave this period of the early 20s and the dying days of acoustical recording, let's listen to an interesting song of praise for the Prince of Wales. Peter Dawson recorded it in April 1923.
When you're looking for a man to lead the empire to her goal, when you're looking for a man to grip the empire's very soul, there is one renowned from sea to sea who nobly plays his part. With a magic charm of youth he holds the key to every heart. For the greatest lad we've ever had is the lad we're glad to know. The greatest lad the empire had, that's why we love him so. He is a true sportsman who plays the game. If winning or losing, his smile's the same. Long may he live, the greatest lad we've ever had. God bless the Prince of Wales. Flows the mother tongue in every land throughout the world. You will hear his praises sung with clarion call and flags unfurled. Gallant deeds of grace and honor ever crown his golden days. For all time a great and lasting fame shall trumpet forth his praise. For the greatest lad we've ever had is the lad we're glad to know. The greatest lad the empire has, that's why we love him so. He is a true born man who plays the game. If winning or losing, his smile's the same. Long may he live, the greatest lad we've ever had. God bless the Prince of Wales, for the greatest lad we've ever had. Is the lad we're glad to know, the greatest lad the Empire has. That's why we love him so. He is a true born sportsman who plays the game. If winning or losing, he smiles the same. Long may he live, the greatest lad we've ever had. God bless the Prince of Wales.
The greatest lad we've ever had was described at the time as having been sung with capital vigour. The second half of the 1920s was a great time for the gramophone industry. The advent of electrical recording in 1925 helped to increase sales, and these were further promoted through the new and rapidly growing medium of the wireless. Peter used electrical recording to advantage and re-recorded many of his standard songs. Sales boomed, and he soon became one of the best-selling artists of the time. There was scarcely a home which didn't have several or more of his recordings.
Here he comes, ta-da-da-da-da-pom-pom-pom. People cry as a man comes by, ta-da-da-da-pom-pom. All the pretty girls look out when they hear that we're about. For of course you understand how they dote upon the band, especially the great drum major. With my baton in my hand, don't you think we all look grand? So you now can understand why the darlings love the band, especially the great drum major. So you now can understand why the darlings love the band, especially the great drum major. Off to war we go, hurrah, ta-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. People say as we march away, ta-da-da-da-da-da. But when shots begin to fly, why should we lie down and die? When of course you understand it's not expected of the band, especially the great drum major. So we just begin to play, then we gently march away, for we must not risk our lives. We have sweethearts, we have wives, especially the great drum major. For we must not risk our lives. We have sweethearts, we have wives, especially the great drum major. When it's over, home we come, ta-da-da-da-da-pum-pum-pum. What a fuss they make of us, ta-da-da-da-pum-pum. How they ask us out to dine, how we put away the wine. Well, of course you understand that's expected of the band, especially the great drum major. Oh, if fogies cry, disarm, have no fear you'll come to harm. There's no danger for the land if they only leave the band, especially the bold drum major. With my baton in my hand, don't you think we all look grand? So you now can understand why the darlings love the band, especially the great drum major. So you now can understand why the darlings love the band, especially the bold drum major.
Few Australians have promoted their country and its music as earnestly and successfully as Peter Dawson. He often recorded Australian songs in preference to material which was better known and more commonly acceptable. Living in England, he found that Australians gravitated to him, and many joined his large band of close friends. One of these was the composer W.G. James, who was responsible for the famous 6 Australian bush songs. In an interview some years ago, Bill James described how they came to be written.
he was a great friend of Oscar Ashe,
The
who was
actor.
running Choo Chin Chow, ran for 5 years, in London. And Ashe, he said, well, he came to me one day, so I had lunch with Oscar Ashe today, and he was furious. He said, Dawson, he said, you're not really straight. He said, you come and advertise yourself as a great Australian singer, and you don't sing an Australian song in the whole of your repertoire. Well, he said, I haven't got any Australian songs. Well, he said, at that time you thought around in getting them. And he came to me and he said, what about writing someone? I said, I can't write any Australian songs if I haven't got any Australian lyrics. But I was speaking to my publishers and recorders in London, who were very big publishers there, and they got very excited about it, and they said, well, my goodness, we'd love to get some of these things. And they introduced me to a man called Edward Teschemacher, who was the outstanding lyric writer of the time over there. He wrote such songs as Because and all those great hits.
Yes.
And had a talk with him, and he said, well, of course, I've never been outside London. He said, I don't know anything about Australia, but I'll get out to Australia House and read up what I can. And the result was that he wrote the 6 Australian bush songs that I published, the lyrics of them, under the name of Edward Lockton.
Oh, that's fascinating, yes.
And Peter Dawson sang them all and recorded them, did a beautiful recording of them.
Yes.
But in the paper reviews, the newspaper came out and they said these songs were something that were really worthwhile, and certainly the lyric writer must be steeped in the Australian bush to write such lovely sentiment about Australia.
Saddle up, for the morn is here. It's goodbye to the mist and the gloom, for the wild ducks cry in the swamp again, and the wattles are in bloom. Where the creeks meet cool neath the Guinness shade, where the torrent's bed is bare. Saddle up, we must gallop home to the land of who knows where. Saddle up for the winds that fall, have a message that seems to say, you must blaze your trail through the sunlit land, for the brave days pass away. You must wheel your cattle and turn your load, you must live and do and dare. Saddle up, you must be a man in the land of who knows where.
The first of W.G. James' 6 Australian bush songs, or Anglo-Australian bush songs. Carl Linger's Song of Australia was written last century, and Peter's recording of that song has stirred many a proud Australian heart. The record was made in London in 1932, and the Australian tenor Fred Williamson is in the accompanying quartet.
There is a land where summer skies are gleaming with 1,000 dyes, blending in witching harmonies, in harmonies. And grass in all and forest height are flushing in the rosy light, and all above is azure bright. Australia, Australia, Australia. There is a land where hope gets deep from sunny plain and woodland steep, and love and joy bright vigils keep, bright vigils keep. Where the glad voice of childish glee is mingling with the melody of nature's hidden minstrelsy. Australia, Australia, Australia. floating free from mountain top to girdling sea, a proud flag waves exultingly, exultingly. And freedom the sons the banner bear, no shackles